Kabbalah is an ancient wisdom that's 2000 years old. It's not a religion, it's a spiritual science. It explains the higher realms, what's going on there, and how we can open up to it. These teachings were kept secret for the vast majority of these 2000 years, and only recently in our generation were they open to the public. This course has 4.5 hours of content in which I talk a lot, non-stop, on Kabbalah, and I answer all kind of questions such as what's the meaning of life, what are we doing here, what's the nature of society, what's the nature of humankind, what's the nature of the creator, talk about all kinds of secret meanings of the Bible, all kinds of secret meanings of letters and numbers. I even talk a little bit about Kabbalistic music. So there's a lot going on in this course, and you are in for a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom. This course will be divided into 3 sections. 1 is Kabbalah basics and background. 2 is Kabbalah's cycle of reality. And 3, the Kabbalah's perspective on the current global crisis. Alright, so this is basically the course, and if you're interested in Kabbalah, and if you want to learn more about it, and why all these celebrities are so interested in it, so this is the course for you. So I just wanted you guys to see the course on Udemy. So this here it is. It has 4.5 hours of content, and here in this YouTube video you are going to watch the following courses. So about the course, this one you already seen. We are going to watch soon lecture 1 out in the open, then lecture 2 some basics, then we are going to see lecture 7 down and up the ladder, and later lecture 13 in the global era. You see that there are 3 major sections: Kabbalah basics and background, and there we are going to see 2 lectures. Then there is the second section, Kabbalah's cycle of reality, so we're going to see this one. And the third section is going to be Kabbalah's perspective on the current global crisis, and there you are going to see this lecture. Alright, so let us continue now with the first lectures, and if you want to see the entire course with all the lectures and all of the content, 4.5 hours of content, so you just click the link at the bottom in the description area. Alright. The Book of Zohar, the pinnacle of Kabbalah books, writes that Kabbalah will boom and prosper at the end of days. With today's popularity of Kabbalah, it appears that the end of days is here. Kabbalah illuminates and describes the law of the spiritual world. It's not religion, it's a spiritual science, and for almost 2000 years, it has been shrouded in mystery. Kabbalah has traditionally been closed to all but a few select and serious students. No longer. Like never before, Kabbalah has become hot. Moreover, Kabbalists, who were previously so hesitant to open their secrets to the public, have become the key players in doing just that. But Kabbalah wasn't always so popular, and Kabbalists weren't nearly so open. For almost 2000 years, Kabbalah was kept secret, shunning the public's eye for faintly lit quarters of Kabbalists who meticulously selected their students and taught them in small groups. For instance, the 18th century Ramkal group, the students of Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, made it especially difficult to join its ranks. Membership required agreeing to a rigorous pact of lifestyle that had to be met all day, every day, for as long as one remained a member. Other groups, such as the Kotz group, used to dress in worn-out clothes and treat non-members with offensive cynicism. They deliberately distanced themselves from others. Group members would scatter breadcrumbs on their beards to appear as if they've been eating on the day of fasting. Naturally, most people were repelled. Nevertheless, the same Kabbalists who hid the wisdom also made tremendous efforts to write the books that remain the pillars of Kabbalah to this day. Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Holy Ari, would take only one student and state that from his time on, the study of the Book of Zohar is permitted to all who wish it. For this reason, in his lifetime, the Ari taught a group of students. At his deathbed, he ordered all except Rabbi Chaim Vital to stop studying. The Ari said that only Chaim Vital understood the teachings properly, and he was afraid that without a proper teacher, the rest would go astray. It was not until the last decade of the 20th century that Kabbalah really began its advent to the center stage of public awareness. The single most dominant figure in the worldwide dissemination of Kabbalah is undoubtedly Rav Yehuda Ashlag, known as Baal HaSulam, owner of the ladder. For his Sulam, letter, commentary of the Book of Zohar, he was the first Kabbalist to not only speak in favor of dissemination, but to actually do it. Baal HaSulam published a magazine, Auma, the Nation, on June 5, 1940. He also tried to convince David Ben-Gurion and other leaders of the Jewish settlement in Palestine, today's Israel, to incorporate Kabbalistic principles in the education system. Baal HaSulam also stated that in the future, people of all religions would study Kabbalah while maintaining their birth religions, with no collision between the two. Such statements and the act of disseminating Kabbalah seems so unorthodox and unacceptable at the time that the nation was shut down after just one issue by the British Mandate in Palestine. In justification, the British Mandate stated that it had been told that Ashlag was promoting communism. Kabbalah has but a single purpose. It offers an approach that helps answer the question, what is the meaning of my life? Now, more than ever before, people are asking about the meaning and the purpose of their lives. With material needs met, and met even beyond imagining, in some cases, people still fear emptiness in their lives. Kabbalah is a discipline that invokes insights and new perspectives on life, which in turn provide a spiritual fullness. This is the key to its popularity. The study of the 10 Sfirot, an extensive commentary on the writing of the great Ari Baal HaSulam, wrote that you are ready for Kabbalah if you sometimes question the meaning of your life, wonder why you and all life exist, question why life can sometimes be so difficult. In the perfect cycle of life, each part has its designated function. No part of creation is free to do as it pleases, because the well-being of each part depends on the well-being of all other parts of creation. Nature's law of interdependency guarantees no creature will overpower other creatures, because to destroy other creatures would mean destroying itself. Human beings are no exception to this rule, but many, if not most, do not appreciate this idea, and in one way or another act in ways that hurt others and thus themselves. By controlling others or our environment, we think we can manipulate and shape the world to our liking. But a quick glimpse at the news makes you reflect on the results. All we have achieved is unhappiness for ourselves and for others. Yet as we will show, nothing is created without a reason, not even human destructiveness. Today, it seems our destructiveness is causing great unhappiness to people and threatening our environment. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that people are beginning to ask questions about life that the wisdom of Kabbalah can help us, if not completely answer, at least explore more deeply. As more people are beginning to realize that greater wealth, more sex, and additional power do not make them happier, they are no longer asking, how to questions, but what for questions. At such a time, any doctrine that can help us answer what for questions has a good chance at popularity. Because Kabbalah specifically explores questions about the meaning of life, it's not surprising many people find it appealing. This, coupled with the publicity generated by its celebrity adherents, has brought it to the attention of seekers everywhere. In the anything goes spirit of today's world, everything's mixed with everything else. Science with religion, rock and roll with Beethoven, there is even sushi ice cream. Following the trend, Kabbalah has been associated with more doctrines and teachings than there are toppings for pizza. But there is another, more serious reason for the sudden emergence of this ancient discipline. Kabbalah has always had a reputation of possessing insight into the highest forces of nature, of the spiritual worlds, and of the nature of God. As a result, people have always wanted to connect Kabbalist terms with all kinds of teachings. The problem with such connections is that they undermine the power of Kabbalah to help us understand our human and spiritual natures. This, after all, is at the heart of today's interest in these teachings, and the reason Kabbalah was developed in the first place. So to clear up any misconceptions, let's look at what Kabbalah is not. It is not, and has nothing to do with, religion, magic, mysticism, divination, cults, holistic medicine, meditation, philosophy, theosophy, psychology or parapsychology, ESP, telepathy, dream interpretation, tarot cards, yoga, red strings, holy water, blessings, past life regression, Reiki, channeling, astrology, astral travels or projection, communicating with the dead, out-of-body experiences, voodoo, Freemasonry, reflexology, UFOs, creationism, Sufism, or any ism. Kabbalah has been around for a long, long time and is only now taking its place in the general public awareness. Those who embrace it at the latest fad will perhaps move on to something else, but those who dig deeply into its principles are likely to find enough to keep them going for a lifetime. Now that we have cleared up common misconceptions about Kabbalah, let's see what it's really all about. This lecture briefly presents the basic concepts of Kabbalah. The terms we present and discuss in this lecture set up the language of Kabbalah that we use throughout the course. This lecture also presents how and why your study of Kabbalah is not only good for you, but also for the benefit of society as a whole. In Hebrew, the word Kabbalah means reception, but Kabbalah isn't just that, reception. It's a discipline of study, a method that teaches you how to receive. Kabbalah helps you know where you truly are in relation to where you think you are. It shows the boundaries of our five senses and opens up the part that they can't reveal by helping you develop a sixth sense. This sixth sense not only enriches your life with a new dimension, but opens a door to a brave new world. There is no death in this world, no sorrow, no pain, and the best of all, you don't have to give up anything for it. You don't have to die to get there. You don't have to fast or restrain yourself in any way. In short, Kabbalah doesn't take you away from life. It adds a whole new meaning and strength to everything that happens. That's right, Kabbalists live life to the fullest. To understand the kind of pleasure that the Kabbalists receive, it's essential to understand a basic concept in Kabbalah. In the whole of reality, there is only a single force, the force of giving. And because that force is giving, it creates something to receive. The giving force in Kabbalah is called creator, and what it creates is called creation. a creature or a created being. The created being is us, humanity as a whole, and each of us in person. This creature goes through a process of learning and development, and at its end discovers the full grandeur and beauty of its creator. Baal HaSulam explains that this revelation of the creator to the creature is the essence and the purpose of the whole of creation. Now let's talk a little bit more about revealing the creator. When Baal HaSulam describes the purpose of Kabbalah as the revelation of his godliness to his creatures in the world, he means that the essence of Kabbalah is to discover the creator because this is what gives us the ultimate pleasure. But there is more to it. Kabbalah explains that discovering the creator means discovering the law that governs nature. In fact, the creator is nature. But by disclosing this law of nature, Kabbalah aims to disclose reality in its entirety, the whole gamut, revealing why things happen to us and how we can not only predict them, but change them to our benefit. Also, if you can understand all sides of nature, you can reach far beyond your present physical life, far beyond the boundaries of your five senses, as if someone has removed a blindfold from your eyes and allowed you to see the true vastness and beauty of the world. How does it work? And what do you actually receive? Reality is like embroidery. When you look at an embroidery, you see a coherent picture. But when you look behind the picture, at the threads that make up the picture, you find a mess of strings and cords that you can't decide where they begin, where they end, and which part of the picture they belong to. Kabbalah helps you understand the threads behind the picture of reality, and teaches you how to become an embroiderer yourself, so you can build a picture that suits your liking. Reception in Kabbalah is all about perceiving the spiritual world. It is a world invisible to the five senses, but one we certainly experience. If everything we perceive depends on our senses, it stands to reason that all we need to sense the spiritual world is a special sense that perceives it. In other words, we don't need to look for anything outside of us, but we need to cultivate a perception that already exists within us, that lies dormant. In Kabbalah, this perception is called the sixth sense. Actually, the title sixth sense is a bit misleading. It's not a sense in the psychological meaning of the word, but because it enables us to perceive something that we otherwise wouldn't, Kabbalists have decided to call this different means of perception the sixth sense. Here's the crux of it all. Our five senses are programmed to serve personal interests. For this reason, all we perceive is what seems to serve our best interests. If your senses were somehow programmed to serve the interests of the whole world, then that's what we would perceive. In this way, each of us would be able to perceive what every other person, animal, plant, or mineral in the universe perceives. We would become creatures of unlimited perception, omniscient, literally godlike people. In such an unbounded state, the five senses would be used in a very different way. Instead of focusing on personal interests, they would serve as means of communication with others. This is why the sixth sense, which enables perception of the spiritual worlds, is not a sense in the usual meaning of the word. It is the intention with which we use our senses. Intention is a critical Kabbalah concept that we explore more fully in Lecture 4. Kabbalah is really very simple, once you know it. It explains that the Creator is benevolent and that He wants to give us endless infinite pleasure. Because the Creator is benevolent, He created us with an endless infinite desire to receive the pleasure He wants to give. In Kabbalah, this is called the will to receive delight and pleasure, or in short, the will to receive. In his introduction to the Book of Zohar, Baal HaSulam explains the Creator's necessity to create the will to receive. We have the capacity, potential, and even unconscious desire to connect with the Creator and in receiving His pleasures, enhance our joy in living. But in practice, there are consequences to such an immense will to receive. Baal HaSulam himself describes this complexity of the human condition in his essay, Peace in the World. We are selfish to the core. However, when corrected, this extreme egoism becomes the highest level of altruism and benevolence. But being born selfish doesn't mean we will remain selfish forever. Remember that the Creator is benevolent. He has nothing on his mind but giving. As a result, he creates creatures that want only to receive. These creatures begin to receive what he gives, more and more and more, endlessly. As the will to receive evolves in creatures, an almost magical transformation takes place. They not only want what the Creator gives, but they also want to actually be creators. Think of how every child wants to become like his or her parents. Think too how the very basis of learning is the little one's desire to grow. Kabbalists say the child's will to be a grown-up stems from the creature's desire to be like its creator. If your parents are your role models, you would study their actions and do your best to emulate them and become a grown-up too. Similarly, if the Creator is your role model, you would study the Creator in order to become like Him. If the Creator you study is all about giving, about benevolence, you can see how the extreme egoism of wanting to become Creator-like can be turned into altruism, which we explore more fully in upcoming lectures. Because that's what He is, in Kabbalah, the ability to be like the Creator is called achieving the attribute of bestowal. The implication, though it may sound like an oxymoron, is that every person's most egoistic desire is to be like the Creator, a total altruist. In his introduction to the Book of Zohar, Baal HaSulam depicts three states that souls experience. The first state is the beginning of creation, which contains everything that will later evolve in the soul, like a seed contains the plant that will grow. The second state is the birth of the soul, somewhat like the seed's stages of growth. The third state is when the soul realizes its potential to the fullest, reaches the level of the Creator, and bonds with Him. In the third state, the soul returns to the first state, but this time it is a conscious and mature act. Another way to think of these stages is like a baby's growth. In the first stage, the child is at its mother's height because she is holding it next to her chest. In stage 2, the child stands and begins to grow from below. In the third and last stage, the child has become fully grown, once more reaching the mother's level, but this time as a conscious and mature adult. The 5-rung ladder. The cycle of spiritual reality is like a ladder. This ladder is probably not available at your local hardware store, but you could ask. The spiritual light is at the top of the ladder. It is the starting point, the zero, or root point, in Kabbalistic language. The starting point is phase 0, which we introduced in lecture 5. But here, we are referring to it as the beginning of the cycle, hence the different name. Kabbalists often use different names to the same spiritual state, to emphasize the different functions of the same spiritual entity or degree. The light came down in 4 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because the cycle starts at root or 0, Kabbalah's letter has 5 stages and 4 steps. A barrier at the end of phase 4 stops the spiritual light, except for a fraction of light, which evolves into our universe. Note the similarity to the 5 levels of human's desire presented in lecture 4. Kabbalah is a system in which cycles in one aspect of existence match cycles in another. The 5 levels of desire in our world correspond to the 5 cycles in the spiritual reality of the upper worlds. As you will see throughout this lecture, the number 5 appears in Kabbalah in different ways, describing different aspects of an overall Kabbalistic journey to spiritual attainment. The fraction of light that went through the barrier continued to evolve, and Earth was formed. The planet cooled and vegetative life appeared, then animals, humans, and finally humans who are reaching the last degree of evolution. The desire for spirituality. So the Creator came down the ladder to Earth, and Kabbalah helps us follow the same path up the ladder to the Creator, which the Creator took to get down to us. 5 phases or 5 sephirot. Because the Creator started out by giving, this is the foundation for the relationship with the Creator, marked by 5 phases of spiritual development. The starting point for you and I involves receiving. The Creator gives and we receive. So phase 0 is the Creator, the desire to give, and happily receiving in phase 1, in the cycle of spirituality. But the Creator gave humans more than a mere desire to enjoy. He gave us the desire to become like Him, because what could be better than being like Him? Because being like the Creator is even better than mere receiving, phase 2 is wanting to give, and in this case, it means wanting to give back to the Creator. In phase 3, we, the created beings, understand that the only way to give to the Creator is to do what He wants because there is nothing else we can give Him. Because He wants us to receive, that's what we do in phase 3. But note the difference. This isn't like the receiving in phase 1. Here in phase 3, we receive because He wants to give, not because we wish to receive. Our intention has changed from receiving for ourselves to receiving for the Creator. This in Kabbalah is considered giving. Phase 3 could have been the end of the process if it hadn't been for the tiny issue called the 3rd stage. We previously said that our goal is not merely to be attached to the Creator, but to become like Him. This can only happen when we have His thoughts, when we know and actually participate in the thought of creation. Therefore, phase 4 introduces a new thrill, the desire to understand the actual thought of creation. Here, you want to understand what the giving is for, what makes it pleasurable, why giving creates everything, and what wisdom it provides. The 4 phases and their root each have a second name. Phase 0 is also called Keter. Phase 1, Chokhmah. Phase 2, Binah. Phase 3, Tiferet or Zar Afin. And phase 4, Malchut. These additional names are called Sephirot because they shine like sapphires. The screen. The Creator did not instill in us the wish to be like Him, however. In phase 4, you decide that you will receive only if you understand why the Creator wants to give, until you understand what's in it for Him. For example, imagine that you offer to take your children to the mall to buy them whatever they want. Unlikely, granted. Now, imagine that they say to you, "Why are you suggesting that? What does that do for you?" If we don't understand why you are giving, we are not interested in the gifts. Far more unlikely. This conditioning of not receiving for yourself is called tzimtzum, restriction. It is the first thing we do to become non-egoistic, and the mechanism that enables that tzimtzum is called masach, screen. Once we have acquired a masach, we can begin to calculate if and how much we can receive while focusing on our parents' pleasure instead of our own. When we acquire this ability, it is considered that we have a complete parzuf, face. 5 times 5 times 5. The 5 phases of spiritual development correspond to 5 spiritual worlds, and each spiritual world contains 5 parzufim, faces. To continue the letter metaphor, the worlds begin at the top of the letter, closest to the Creator, and continue on down. The worlds from the bottom are Adam Kadmon, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. The world closest to the light and the creator, Adam Kadmon, is also the most spiritual. The other worlds move downward, becoming more material and less spiritual as they descend. Our task is to attain the highest degree in our advancement toward the creator. There are 125 degrees in the spiritual ladder that move you up through these 5 worlds. Why the number 125? Because there are 5 worlds and 5 partsufim in each world, and 5 sephirot, Keter to Malchut, Keter to Malchut, in each partsuf. Therefore, 5 times 5 times 5 equals 125. You may have noticed the Kabbalists have a thing with numbers. Note that our world does not count as a spiritual degree. The degrees begin above our world and move up. Asiya is the closest spiritual world to our own and the starting point of spiritual attainment. The advancement from one degree to the next happens only when a person has experienced the full measure of desire in the present degree, with the pure intention to give to the Creator. A high degree is characterized by a greater desire for pleasure and a stronger intention to give that pleasure to the Creator. The smallest element in spirituality is called Sephirah, because it shines like a sapphire. We already said that there are 5 basic Sephirot: Keter, Chokhmah, Binah, Zeir Anpin, and Malchut. However, Zeir Anpin is made of 6 internal Sephirot: Chesed, Gvura, Teferet, Nezah, Hod, and Yesod. So whether we talk about the 5 Sephirot, Keter, Chokhmah, Binah, Zeir Anpin, and Malchut, or about the 10 Sephirot, Keter, Chokhmah, Binah, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Nezach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut, it refers to the same basic structure of 10 Sephirot. Each 5 Sephirot makes up 1 partsuf, face, and 5 partsufim make up 1 olam, world. Interestingly, the word olam comes from the Hebrew word a'alama, which means concealment. The higher the olam, the less there is a'alama of the Creator. So when you get to the higher worlds too, you'll know where you are by seeing what's around you and comparing it to the tour guide, the Kabbalah books. One of the mechanisms of this progression and development is the concept of tzimtzum, restriction, which we mentioned earlier. It works like this. If you have a desire for object A, but a much stronger desire for object B, then your desire for object A gets tzimtzumed, restricted. For example, say you are very tired and want to go to sleep. You tuck yourself in and cuddle under the warm blanket. Suddenly, someone knocks on your door and sounds that there is a fire and that you'd better run for your life. Naturally, your desire to save yourself is stronger than your desire to sleep. At that moment, the fatigue vanishes as if it never existed. In truth, it does exist, and you will feel it again when the danger has passed. But the desire to live restricted it and covered it completely. Turning back to our topic, to move from degree x to degree x plus 1, we need to want the degree x plus 1 more than our present x degree. In the study of the 10 Sephirot, Baal HaSulam says that even though Malchut, the Sephira that represent the future us, wanted to receive the Creator's light very much, she couldn't. Malchut didn't know how to receive the light with the intention to give. Remember the mole example from earlier in this lecture. Without the intention to give, she would become different from the Creator and therefore separated from Him. Because she did not want to become separated from the Creator, she restricted her desire to receive so she could stay close to the Creator. This is why the first thing you must learn when entering the spiritual world is how to restrict your egoistic desires. If you can't do that, the doors to spirituality remain closed, which brings us to the barrier. The 5th level and the barrier. The sole purpose of everything that happens in our world
is to take you across the barrier between our world and the spiritual world. Once you cross it, you can start advancing in spirituality. Where did this barrier come from? You may recall that contact with the Creator can exist only if you, like Him, have the intention to give. Because He created you without the intention to give, you are separated from Him. This separation is called a barrier because it bars you from direct contact with Him. The good news is that you can cross the barrier and meet the Creator face to face simply by wanting the intention to give. Kabbalah has many divisions. One division is into Sephirot, another is into worlds, and another is into level of vitality. So spiritual as well as corporal life is divided into 5 levels of vitality. 1. Still, inanimate. 2. Vegetative. 3. Animate, alive. 4. Speaking, human. 5. Spiritual, point in the heart. Every being has all 5 levels, but the predominant level determines its category. Animals, for example, have some characteristics that are typically human, such as the ability to plan for the future, but this is not their predominant trait. Humans have animalistic characters too, but we are still fundamentally different from animals. What makes people human, in the spiritual sense, is their ability to experience a uniquely humane state, the desire to be spiritual, like the Creator, the point in the heart. This is the highest state where you can cross the barrier into the spiritual realm. Achieving this stage involves different factors than the first 4 levels of vitality, which are based on biological factors. Level 1 to 4 evolved through pressures from nature that push evolution along unconsciously. But evolution to the 5th level is voluntary and conscious, made out of one's own free choice. A desire for it is the first step to crossing the barrier. It's the desire mentioned in the beginning of this lecture, the desire to ask what life is about, what desire upon which Kabbalah itself is based. The start of the climb. At the bottom rung of the spiritual ladder, where you and I start, we are disconnected from the Creator. Here, the task is to refurbish our desire for spirituality and make it a working vehicle to drive us up the spiritual ladder once more. All souls started out at being one with the Creator. In a sense, then, you and I have been developing and refurbishing ourselves for many thousands of years. In the framework of Kabbalah, the last 6,000 years have been the culmination of this process. Now the process is nearing its end, a time when all of humanity is becoming spiritual. So let's look at the process and see how Kabbalah shows a way to go about this spiritual process. Towards a common soul. Kabbalah provides a method for spiritual correction and specifies a 6,000 phase route, referred to in the literature as 6,000 years. After their complete correction, all souls reunite into one common soul and start working as a unified system. The construction of this common soul binds the individual souls together so that each of them feels what all others feel. This is the achievement of absolute attainment, called the end of correction. The only thing necessary to embark on this spiritual journey is the desire to do so. No spiritual progress can possibly occur in you if you do not want it beforehand. At the spiritual degree, evolution should be conscious and voluntary. Questions such as, why am I suffering? Why does pain come from? And what does it want from me? Is there a purpose to suffering? Is it all worthwhile? Are useful if the predicaments give you the sense to ask for directions on how to evolve. They are even more useful if you can use them to increase your desire for spirituality. When you begin to ask yourself these questions, it is a sure sign that you've begun your way up to spiritual ladder. Up the ladder. The desire to be spiritual is at the first step up the ladder. You start by wanting to fulfill this desire, and you will obtain it by simply asking in your heart. Asking to be more spiritual is called raising man, Aramic, Mayan Nakavin, female water. Raising man is also called a prayer. Man, or desire to be more spiritual, comes from two sources. One is your own spiritual structure, reshimot. These are the soul's unconscious recollections of its past states. The second is the environment, friends, books, films, and all other media, which enhance and speed up the man that the reshimot evoke. Back to the future. If you remember at the beginning of this lecture, we stated that the root was the beginning, at the top of the letter. Although it may seem like a contradiction, it's important to remember it because it means that you and I contain the seeds of the root within us, the seeds of the Creator, if you will. So the root is both the beginning of the cycle of spirituality and our ultimate goal. Having fallen, you and I seek to regain the top, or correct ourselves. That requires climbing the spiritual ladder from the earthly world back up to the root. To understand how to return to your root, you need to know your root and how you came down from there, the reshimot. How else could you know where to return if you hadn't already been there in some way? The emergence of new desires, new reshimot, indicates that you are making progress, how fast you are progressing, and if you are on the best and fastest route. In the end, we will all reach the end of correction, but a correct use of the reshimot can save us much trouble, time, and effort. You move up the ladder each time you increase your desire to be spiritual. As you become more spiritual, you build on the last degree of spirituality to achieve the next. Every time you increase your need, your future spiritual degree responds by elevating you to it. The cycle repeats itself and moves you to become more like the Creator. Once you have examined all your egoistic desires on the egoistic level, called the world, a new desire appears. This new desire is special. It is your first desire with non-egoistic intention. This event in the Kabbalistic life, though it is a natural evolution of the surfacing of the desires, reshimot, is so radical that it is known as the crossing of the barrier, or the admittance to the spiritual world. At any state your soul is in, the reshima is predetermined. If you have the urge to realize the reshima, then urges stems from within. But if you use the environment to strengthen your desire and accelerate the unfolding of the reshima, that would not only shorten the unfolding period, but also elevate the experience to the spiritual level and make it adventurous and exciting. What goes around comes around. Life shows us that we cannot survive without a sufficient number of people around to serve and help provide for our needs. Humans are social beings, and society is like a machine where each individual is like a wheel, linked to the other wheels. A single wheel cannot move by itself. However, it joins the motion of all the other wheels and helps the machine perform its purpose. If the wheel breaks, the problem is not the wheel's problem, but the problem of the whole machine, because the broken wheel stops the machine from running. It turns out that we are not evaluated for who or what we are, but for the kind of service we do for society. A bad person is only as bad as he or she harms the public, not because he or she didn't perform up to the level of some abstract value of good. Good and bad attributes and deeds are good or bad according to whether they benefit the public. If a part of the group does not contribute its share, those individuals not only harm the collective, but they too are harmed. This is why a negative society harms the individual. Likewise, a good society benefits the individual. Individuals are part of the whole, and the whole is not worth more than the sum of its individuals. In Kabbalah, the collective and the individual are one and the same. One of the key ideas to understand about Kabbalah is that people will come to see that their own benefit and the benefit of the collective are the same. As people realize that, the world will be much closer to its full correction. Kabbalah explains that our experiences are personal, but they are described in general terms that apply to everyone. For example, we all agree that blood is red when we look at it, but we each experience it very differently. Some people faint at the sight of blood, some say cool, and some say, ah. You know what Kabbalah is, and how it got started, but how does it relate to today's world?
In this section, we'll explore the reasons for the global crisis we are facing from the Kabbalistic point of view. You may be asking, what's in it for me? Well, we'll also discuss your role in the big picture and how you can help heal yourself, your close environment, and the world at large. Remember, we are all one soul. What happens to me affects you directly, so you have the ability to impact someone on the other side of the world. The final section will help you understand how to use Kabbalah to make the world a better place. It is hardly news that the world is in crisis, but the worst part is not that we don't feel as happy or safe today as we did yesterday. The worst part is the sensation that we have lost control. It seems more and more difficult to make our tomorrows brighter, and that's the real crisis. In this chapter, we explore the roots of our crisis and the way to cure it. This lecture introduces the concepts, and the following lectures discuss in more detail the ideas presented here and their practical implementation. Our big blue marble. When miners dig coal in China, the air in California gets polluted. When emissions from American cars dissolve in the air, the ice in Greenland melts. And when the ice in Greenland melts, the sea level rises and the Netherlands sinks. It boils down to this. We are all part of the global village, and our actions affect one another. Through thick and through thin. Of all the values you and I hold dear, the one we probably cherish most is privacy. We'd all like to have a piece of private property. Back in Lecture 5, we said that there are 5 levels of desire: inanimate, vegetative, animate, human, and spiritual. We also said that there was once a single soul, called Adam, which broke into myriad factions, which then dressed in physical bodies in our world. This is why we have so many people on planet Earth. But no matter how far we feel from one another, we are still that one soul, Adam. If a brain cell is obvious to a blood cell, it doesn't mean that it can live without it. Without the blood cells bringing food and oxygen to the brain cells would die, and so would the blood cells. So would we. Through thick and through thin, united we stand and united we fall, because united we are already. Assuming responsibility. Consider this. A newborn baby is responsible for nothing. How can it be? Because it cannot think about things and process them, because it cannot understand the world it experiences. A baby cannot be held responsible. But an older child is already responsible for something, even if it's just to remember to put the sandwich in the lunchbox, or to take the dog out at the end of the school day. A youth is already responsible for many more things, and a young adult is expected to take full responsibility for his or her life. When we grow and have kids, we become responsible for others too. But what if we were responsible for every single human being on Earth? What if that responsibility was not only to the people alive today, but also to all the people, animals, plants, and minerals that have ever lived since the moment of creation and to all eternity? This is the meaning of spiritual responsibility. Now, this responsibility may sound like a heavy load, but what if that responsibility was not the result of some mean school teacher wishing to torment his students with an assignment they can't perform? What if it were simply the result of love? We love our children, so responsibility for their well-being is not only natural, but welcome. What if we felt the same kind of love and care that we feel for our children toward the whole world and everything in it? Toward all of the creatures that ever lived, that are alive today, and that will be alive at any time in the future. That immense love is spiritual bliss. Kabbalah helps us experience this immense love and make it inherent in our nature, as one unit. Remember how we started? First there was Adam, one soul. Adam was a good soul, wanting only to give to the Creator, but he misjudged his ability to give to the Creator, and that mistake cost him, and consequently us, heavily. He broke.
his soul shattered into 600,000 pieces, which still today continue to break, hence the billions of people inhabiting our world. All of them are tiny fragments of the original soul. The beauty of it is that each of us is both a particular soul and a piece in the puzzle of Adam Harishon. Without us, all of the pieces of that first soul, just as every cell in our body contains all the generic information to create a whole new identical body, or a part of the hologram contains the entire image. But to realize that we are one soul, we have to want to feel this way. This simple rule runs throughout Kabbalah and spirituality. No coercion. In other words, you don't get what you don't want to get. The cells in our bodies don't think about how they work together. They just function as one unit. We wouldn't make it past the first week of pregnancy if it hadn't been this way. Indeed, biology provides a perfect model for what Kabbalah describes as the common soul. When a baby grows in its mother's womb, the minute cells begin to differentiate, a beautiful thing happens. They begin to communicate and cooperate with one another. The more differentiated they become, the more they are forced to cooperate. A liver cell can't do what a kidney cell does, so the kidney cleans up the toxins that the liver can't, and the liver creates the new cells that the kidney can't. This way, they are different but cooperating, and every part of the body benefits as a result. The time of togetherness. Just like our bodies, our souls can work cooperatively. We can live as separate units, just as there are uncellular creatures, but we all know that uncellular creatures are at the low end of nature's pyramid. The creatures at the top of the pyramid are multicellular creatures. Each cell in their bodies perform only one function, and all the cells cooperate to sustain the organism. Kabbalists of the past attained the spirituality on their own because they were unique souls with unique tasks, hence the fantastic nature of their achievements. But it's different today. Now that Kabbalah is open to all and studied by many, it's a safe bet that most of us will attain nothing individually. As a unit, however, we can achieve far more than has ever been achieved before. For this reason, contemporary Kabbalists stress the importance of dispersing the knowledge of Kabbalah. They want the world to know so that more cells will join in the collective work of the soul, the spiritual body. Little me in you, little you in me. There are many offshoots to the fact that we are made of one shattered soul. One of them is that if I correct myself, I also correct my part in you, and vice versa. If you correct yourself, you also correct your you in me. To bring it all down to earth, let's take three separate people as an example: Jack, James, and Mary. One day Jack begins to feel his point in the heart and begins to correct himself. Jack has a little piece of James and a little piece of Mary within him, and the two others also have little pieces of the others in them. They are cells in the same spiritual body, and each cell contains all generic information to create a whole body. When Jack corrects himself, the Jack in James and the Jack in Mary are corrected too. Of course, the other two don't feel it because they are not Jack. Subsequently, however, the Jack within them begins to urge the other two to start checking out this new concept of spirituality. In this way, Jack subsequently inspires them to check it out for themselves. His transformation serves as a model for theirs. This is because the basic structure of every human being is the same. We all have points in the heart, so we don't need to receive them from anyone. We need to merely listen openly, and our own point in the heart will open. We've already talked in lecture 3 and 7 about the importance of the social influence in determining the direction of our growth. If we want to become rich, we have to surround ourselves with people who want money. If we want to become lawyers, we surround ourselves with judges and advocates and listen to what they say. We learn more than just techniques by talking to people we want to resemble. We absorb their spirit. Absorbing the spirit is the most important thing in everything we do, and it's the whole difference between success and mediocrity or even failure. The same goes with becoming spiritual.
The best way to do it is to surround yourself with people who want spirituality. We all have more egoistic desires within us than anything else, and just one tiny speck of spirituality, true altruism, a point in the heart. So if many others talk to me about spirituality, I get inspired and think that everyone but me has loads of spirituality. Of course it isn't true, but it does have the effect of making me want spirituality much more strongly, thus accelerating my progress. In turn, my progress accelerates others' progress too, and their bogus spirituality becomes a reality, saving ourselves and everything else. Today, many already realize that man is the only destructive element in nature. The reason for it is that we are not really part of nature. Our bodies belong to the animal kingdom, but our minds don't. Our minds are the reflection of our higher spiritual self, which is still hidden from us. Animals don't need to be taught how to behave because their behavior is hard-coded in them, written in their genes before they are born. If we were made of only the animal part in us, we'd be the same. But we are not, and therein lies the problem. When babies learn to crawl, we must watch so they don't hurt themselves because their bodies can do things that their minds cannot monitor. For the children to avoid trouble, they don't need to develop their bodies further. They need to develop their minds, so their minds will know what to do with their bodies. There is a rule in Kabbalah. General and particular are equal. It means that what is true for an individual is true for the whole, and vice versa. Just like a single baby, the whole of humanity must develop its mind so that its body, the collective body of humanity, will not harm itself. Regrettably, we are slow learners, and this is why we are harming every creature and place on Earth, extinguishing its life and exploiting its minerals. In the process, we are also harming ourselves, probably more than we are harming any other creature. Just look at the rare degenerative diseases today, and you'll see what we are doing to ourselves. To stop this exploitation, we first have to correct our minds, and our minds can be corrected only if we correct the spiritual element in all of us. Spirit over matter. In Kabbalah, the most basic rule is called the higher degree rules. Spirit is above matter. There is probably no dispute about that. So to change our world, we have to go to the place that corrupted it. And that place is the human mind. As long as humans were only sophisticated animals, the world was fine. It was not in danger. But when we began to want to control it, when we started developing our egoism, that's when the troubles started. Not just for ourselves, but for the world at large. If we correct our spirits, our bodies will act naturally, in harmony with the whole of nature, and hence with the Creator. Then we won't have to worry about saving virtually extinct animals. Nature will do it. After all, it has been doing it for millions of years before we came, and far better than we have ever succeeded. On the desire sequence. There is a rule in Kabbalah. He who is greater than his friend, his desire is greater than him. It means that if Jack, for instance, has a greater desire than James, Jack's desire is greater than Jack himself. In other words, in the correction process, we are always one step behind our desires. This is a deliberate process. It isn't that our desires grow, they only appear one by one, from lighter to heavier. When I finish correcting one desire, the next desire in line appears. Remember the Reshimot? They form the desire sequence that leads up to the spiritual ladder. This is why Jack, who corrected his previous desire, is greater than James, who hasn't corrected this level of desire. But Jack's desire is greater than Jack himself because it is leading him to the next degree. More on that in just a bit. Desires running rampant. We've already said that desires grow from generation to generation. Our generation has the worst and strongest desire in history of humankind. Kabbalists graphically demonstrate what they think of this generation with the words, "The face of the generation is as the face of a dog."
Desire is running rampant to the point that people simply cannot find satisfaction anymore, hence the soaring depression and violence rates in today's society. But people in this generation aren't merely greedier than their parents were. Today, for the first time, there is a desire to know how things really work, to control creation, to equalize with the Creator. This is a desire of millions of people, not just of a select few. More people are not settling for the answers provided by traditional means. They want to find out for themselves, and find out for certain. Taking someone else's word for it just doesn't do it for them any longer. These people need a method to reveal the overall design, and that method is Kabbalah. Technology broke its promise. As long as we are not using the method that can satisfy our deepest desire, to know the designer of the world, and to learn from him why he did it and how, we will not be happy. But as we have said before, the more we want, the more we develop our brains to provide us with what we want. Technology isn't going to stop just because we have a new desire, but as long as our technology is not accompanied by the study of the upper worlds, it will only make us feel worse. There isn't anything wrong with technology itself. It's just that it has become imbued with hopes that don't belong there. We think it can make us happier by making our lives faster, easier, more exciting. But all it can really do is show us more easily and more quickly that we are empty inside. For knowledge to make us happy, it needs to be used for spiritual purposes. When we do that, what we know will open up new sides of itself that will make us see our world in a light we never dreamed existed. The upper world isn't a different place, it's a different perspective. A great potential. In light of what we've just said about growing desires and scientific process, we can now begin to see our current situation from a spiritual point of view. In the past, people were not as mean and egoistic as they are today. The gradual emergence of the reshimot accounts for the change. When reshimot of smaller desires appear, they don't seem like such mean desires. Today, however, the last and most egoistic reshimot are appearing. But this is not a bad thing. It's a lever for greater achievements. If we play our cards right, if we funnel these precious desires into the only constructive direction there is, the sky, or shall we say heaven, is the limit. Wishing for the king's daughter's hand. We can't control which desires surface, but we can control what we do with them once they do. People still want money, power, and knowledge. But people are also getting frustrated and depressed because underneath the surface, the foundation of all those desires is spiritual. People want to control everything. They want to know everything. Granted, most of us don't feel those desires, but we have them nonetheless because it's human nature to want everything. The only reason that we don't feel them is that we are realistic enough to know we will never have them. So we subconsciously prohibit them from surfacing. In Kabbalistic terms, this is called, a man does not wish for the king's daughter's hands. Even so, knowing that I can't have the king's daughter doesn't mean that deep down I wouldn't like to. Thus frustration arises. But the truth is that even if I did have the king's daughter, I wouldn't be satisfied. A desire that great really stems from the spiritual. It can't be completely satisfied only through spiritual means. If we direct these desires towards the root from which every desire and every pleasure comes, then we will experience the satisfaction of these desires immediately after we experience the desire itself. It would be like a never-ending chain of desire and pleasures endlessly linked. What would we do then? Delightfully ride the wave. Selfish to the core. We don't have to worry about the kind of desires that surface in us. Deep within, we are all potential criminals of the worst kind you can imagine. But that doesn't mean that we have to act on those desires. Most of us don't. But if we acknowledge those parts of ourselves, if we can begin to realize that we are that selfish, that's a very good start. We can then really start a change in ourselves and in the world around us. No good thing ever came out of another good thing. Good things always grow out of crises because crises are opportunities for change. It is simple mathematics to see that because the present crisis is the worst, the opportunity for growth and for progress is greater than ever. How to start the change? Now we are left with just one question. What do I need to do? That's the beauty of Kabbalah. You don't need to do anything. You need to think. Every now and again, hook up with Kabbalah, read something about it, watch a lesson on the video, talk about it with friends. That's enough to begin the change. Nature created us egoistics, and nature will change us. But for the change to happen, we need to want it to happen. That's all we need to worry about, wanting to change.